Hi. Welcome to a tutorial. I am going to take you through a project from the Armajet game music. This one's called Wallhack. I'm going to take you through this project, kind of rediscover it for myself because I haven't seen it for a while. And I'm going to tell you about some of the methods I used and some of the sounds that are in there so you can get an idea of how this all came together. So first of all, I'm going to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. Very important. There we go. So let's start with just the track and the basic elements that are in there. I'm using Cubase number 10. As you can see, it's not a very well organized project. I am not disorganized, but I'm not really organized either. I'm just somewhere in the middle. This project I didn't really end up cleaning up for at some point in the session, but I usually will have my main groups up here in the project, and then my drums underneath, and then basses underneath that, and then underneath that I'll have synths and leads and stuff, and then effects and risers and stuff further down the bottom. Here I also used a video track for a certain portion, so there's some audio from the video too. But as you can see, a lot of sounds aren't named. It's just Serum number 3, and then it's a bounced version of that. I have no idea what that is. So as you can also see, outside of the loop range, there's quite a few other ideas still floating around. Other loops from other versions of the project where I tried a bunch of different ideas that didn't make the final arrangement or are slightly different from what the final arrangement is like. So if I go to the end of the loop area here, we're at, what is it? Well, we're at about 5 minutes worth of music. So yeah, it goes on for 12 here, which is quite long, but I'm sure these are all kind of duplicates. So yeah, this for this track, obviously the sort of techno attitude, the 90s synth, very synthy 90s sound I really wanted to incorporate, very driving, simple, and I wanted to do something in the electro style. A Gustaffelstein track was one of the reference tracks for the music, so I wanted to go in that direction a little. And I ended up with this. I'll just play you the intro or the build up and then the drop. Etc., etc. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the track already, otherwise you probably wouldn't be watching this, but just for reference. So one thing that I really like about this track, which is not that obvious, is that it has a really strange drum pattern. It's got a kick on the first count, then it's got a kick and a snare on the second count, nothing on the third count, kick and snare on the fourth count, and then nothing on the fifth count, and then kick and snare on the sixth count, and the same so, and then nothing, and then on the eighth count there's another kick and snare. So basically there's a hole in the groove constantly, and it's mainly just a kick and a snare hitting at the same time at the spot where normally a snare would hit, but it sounds like it's 4/4, but it's not. So listen to it again. So it has a 4/4 feel, but it's dominated by a kick and snare. Like if I mute, I'll try to see what happens if I mute the snare. I think this is mostly the snare. So you're only hearing the kick. See, the kick isn't that important. It's almost like the snare is more important than the kick. but the kick is the snare, because if I mute the kick, there's hardly any snare left. So there's a nice little balance, a nice little sort of acoustic gluing of a kick sound and a snare sound, which sort of has this general impact feel, like the kick sounds like the fundamental of the snare in a way, which I think is a cool way to make a groove. And I guess the rest of the groove is a big soup of cymbals, and I think I did something kind of interesting with them. Let's see. So yeah, this is playing over the top, which is some crazy frequency shifted ride loop. And then I have a sort of breakbeat playing. All right, that's where that snare fundamental is coming from. So forget what I just just said. This is actually very important for the snare as well. If I were to mute this. Oh, actually, no. So this is being eaten up by something. See, I rediscovering my own project is a bit of a process, because I make messes in ways that I often forget afterwards, and then I always just start from scratch again the next time because I've forgotten how I did it the last time, which is kind of a strange goldfish way of producing, but it works for me because I always sort of start from scratch and make things anew and discover new things. So what I think I have here, I have a group called Drop Group. Let's see what that does. Right, so what I wanted to do there is I wanted to crunch up the bass and that lead with the top end to give it this nice crunchy sound, but I didn't want to do that in mastering. I wanted to contain it within one group. So I think I created a pre-group where I collected all the top material. So this is being compressed really heavily, it seems. Wait, it's being compressed through a sidechain of some sort. Let's see what's sidechaining it. Ah, the bass sounds are sidechaining it. Cool. Cool idea. So the bass sounds are sidechaining that initially, and it's getting squashed, and then it's going through a lot of plugins together here with the bass. So it's going through some tape first, then another C6 with some compression. Because I think like I have something going on here in this high mid range, in the lower highs, so to speak. Because I think the hats were getting a little spitty or was getting a little aggressive, so I'm taming that here. Then there's a gain reduction on there, which is just an aggressive compressor. Dynamic spectrum mapper, what is that doing? Not that much, I think just kind of flattening it out. Then some EQ, and then a limiter. So yeah, so the limiter is on there so that it's just completely, flat when the other drums hit. So I want it to, when the kick comes in and the snare comes in, I want it to just be very clean. But when this loop has room to breathe, it really starts sounding aggressive and then pushes back and forth. That's the sound that I was going for. I have a rhythmizer on here, which is a cool Melda plugin, which can do retriggering. So this is, I think, yeah, if I turn this off, the riff will sound different. Right, so that was probably my original riff. Which is kind of cool as well. Then that guy I don't think is being retriggered the same way, or maybe it is. Yeah, it is. But it's also playing the pattern already. Anyway, this thing is creating that, as you can see here, it's retriggering a part of the riff, which gives it that kind of cool stuttery feel. And that's basically the main sort of drums and bass part of this track. We can have a little look at the kick. I think it's just a very clean kick 2 kick. Oh, I need to update this. And it looks very basic. Yeah, it's actually quite long too. You would usually maybe clean this up a little bit and make it shorter, but here the kick just has room to breathe. And then there's obviously another bass sound that I don't think is part of this equation. Yeah, so So this sound, like the main bass, this one, so that one is going through sidechain, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, the bass sidechain. But it's not pushing that group. So that's not pushing all the high-end stuff because it has the noise on there and it already has an aggressive sound. I didn't want that to also crunch up all that extra high-end and make that even more aggressive. But it is obviously an important part of the riff. And also, something else is happening there. As you can hear here, I'm introducing this device, this guy, this low brass synth. And I think there's some more on there. Yeah. So here it has a long tail, and then on the drop I still wanted to have it featured, but it's I'm cutting it off because I wanted to make space for the rest of the riff, so you can hear it like cutting off. If you don't know that that's happening, I think you're kind of getting tricked into just thinking it's the same sound because the other sound takes over your attention. But if you pay attention to it, it is suddenly way shorter on the drop. And these vocal synth stabs take over, these little, well, they have OTT on them because that suits these sorts of sounds. A little EQ, a little bit of tape. It's not that important, I guess. So I did want to look at these for a second because I think this riff and like this kind of structure came from, this is where the original idea for the track came from making these sorts of sounds. I went through making a lot of sounds first for this project, like trying to find the sounds that really identified Armajet as a game. So for example, I can see if I can find them. I made a bunch of like comb filter sounds that I thought were really, for some reason, could be the vibe of the game. So I thought these kind of like metallic but synthy sounding sounds could be cool to make riffs with and to sort of make the main theme, like to develop a main theme. So I made some collages with it. So that sort of thing could be an identifying device. It didn't end up being used that way. But I think these sounds are from another session. The vocal sounds were from another session where I wanted to get this kind of 90s trance vocal sound and make riffs with that one. And so that's what happens here. Another cool thing that happens in this little intro. So it's this guy, but there's also this synth playing underneath. Which is, you know, a play on what the bass does later. Is this going through the same group? Compressor things. So I guess I have a group with compression where I'm compressing things. What is this doing? Is this doing the same thing as the other one? No. So this is something else. But I guess I'm compressing some things together in that group. Anyway, what's cool about this sound is it's got a verb send, I'm pretty sure. And the reverb is being gated by Pro G probably, and then I have MIDI going through that Pro G to open up the gate. So this is without the verb. But now if I send the MIDI to the gate, you get that, which is way cooler. So this verb channel is like a extra layer of the sound that you can completely shape. Like you could also, for example, put a delay after the gate or put a delay on the sound so that it moves to a different spot and then open up the gate at different positions. You'll have like, it'll sound like it's a different synth. I mean, this to me sounds like a layer of a completely different synth, but it's made from that original sound, which I think is really cool. And just to go through what is this sound, for example. Oh, there's a lot of OTT happening here. Is this a Oh yeah, it's a serum. It's very basic. Oh, it's pretty basic anyway. And it's not, I guess it might be more interesting to look at the main bass sound if we're going to look at some synths. So, what do we have here? This guy, for example. Okay, so that's split into two. Yeah. So I'd split that into two because I wanted to have that short one control it differently, have it sound differently, to create some dynamics. So this is a serum instance. And I guess if I take off the plugins for a second, what does it sound like? Pretty cool. I think you can already tell this comb filter is creating that resonant overtone. So if I turn that off, it's not. Okay, then maybe it's this guy, synced, banded. What is this? Ah, yeah, it must be this dude. It's up 4 octaves. Right. So it's actually pretty basic. There's a wavetable here that I think I made myself. It's a pretty basic wavetable. It's like a bass thing. And I think it's got a third harmonic in there, pretty strong, but then I bend it back to become more of a saw wave, so it has more even harmonics and it has more tonality, so you get a kind of chunky bass sound that sounds a little, I don't know, synthy, 90s, whatever. And then here, I'm just adding what looks like just a saw wave 4 octaves above it. I don't think much else is going on. Let's look at these envelopes. Yeah, so this envelope controls the level of that over the top. And this isn't, like there is, I can see that there's things being automated here, but the noise oscillator is switched off. So that was probably from an older version of the sound. There's no dimension expander. There's some distortion on there. Is that being automated? No. There's an extra filter because I guess without the filter it would just blast. Right, so, and then I'm using multiband compression here, which is very similar to what OTT does. So without these, it'll sound very different. So yeah. Then after that I add a wave folder distortion. I love wave folder distortion. It's very easy to do way too much of it, but I love using it. It's very powerful. Then it looks like I have a reverb going here. That's cool. Yeah, but that sounds interesting, doesn't it? Right, yeah. The reason why that sounds interesting, of course, is because of the rhythmizer that I showed you before. You're hearing a little bit of a reverb thing coming in, almost as if the reverb's being automated, but that's the rhythmizer re-triggering a part of the reverb tail. So that one is just a re-trigger. So the reverb doesn't have to do that much. It's a nice short reverb. I really like the sound of it. Actually, I should use that more often. And then there's just some EQ, some mid-side EQ here, some, yeah, big boost over there. Because this is getting taped up and crunched up later and also controlled a bit, I think I'm using this to just push the sound a little bit and give it more edge. And in the mix, obviously, when you're hearing it playing now, it's going through that channel that it normally goes through with a bunch of other elements, so it doesn't sound the exact same. It sounds a little too aggressive now, but if you play it in the mix with the other, it actually doesn't sound exactly right. Yeah, that's because this is not switched on, dummy. Okay, cool. I guess. That was it. It was the comb filter. Forget what I said. Cool. All right, so that's an interesting part of this song. And I guess this sound is, let's look what this sound is made of. Another serum. Who would have thought? So what is this doing? It sounds really quite brutally distorted. There's some noise happening. What is this wavetable? That's a very similar wavetable actually. There's a pitch envelope happening, of course, to give it that kick kind of transient. And what else? Yeah, the wavetable has, and the warp has a little bit of an envelope. And then we have some white noise that's coming in over the top that's being filtered by this bandpass. And that's it. It's just being filtered by a bandpass and then tube distorted and then wave folded and then sort of tape distorted. A little layer of soft clipping after that. So it's a very crude sound. But it layers well with that other sound, and it's a, you know, it's a, I think it's also kind of a staple of the Armajet sounds, because I used a similar thing in D-Cloak. Also has this one bass that is like a 808 sounding bass with noise over the top, kind of like a signature thing in here. So let's see what else we have here. I think we have one more really cool thing. Right. So what happens there, which is probably my favorite thing about this song, is the way these textures interact and that brass that comes out. Like I had these the drop kind of dialed in at some point, and I felt like, you know, this first melodic device, like this first sort of synth, that's cool. It's like a, you know, but it's not really a musical moment. So I deliberately wanted to add like a real, you know, musical theme to it. So I wanted to, decided I wanted to use a big kind of cinematic horn sound. Actually very synthy cinematic horn, but it has a really cool, convincing sound, I think. And so to get that to gel together, I actually should probably play you these other sounds around it too, because this sound over here is pretty important. It's just very lo-fi and weird and ringy, but very vibey, and really adds to this first section. And then sets this up, because it has this swelling that you don't really hear it, but it's there, and then the real swelling sort of takes center stage after that. And that I really like. So let's get into these horns. I think, yeah, so there's a group of the horn and all the vocals. This horn is made out of two separate saw synths that are playing different notes. So what happens here, as you can see, is an F and then a G and a G sharp, which is like the second and the minor third. So it's playing a chord. So, which is, you know, you don't hear it as a chord, you're hearing one note. That's because this guy, let's see if it's, yeah, I'm using this Synaptic Morph plugin to morph from one saw to the other. And when it's morphing from that one note to the other, you get this kind of, this sort of screamy sound, this broken up sound that, and then slowly the note swells out of it. And that's what I was looking for. So now you're only hearing the low saw without the right automation, I think. So the high saw isn't coming in, so it has nothing to morph with. And I think I'm also sending this vocal. No, this vocal is going straight to something else, but see? So what you're hearing mostly is the low synth wanting to become the high synth. If I mute the low synth, I think, yeah, if I mute this MIDI, I don't think you'll hear, well, yeah, you'll hear. Whoa, that's fucking weird. Why is it doing that? I would expect it to be much louder because it's only, well, anyway, I'm not sure how I did all that stuff, but basically, what I loved about this is that if I go into here, it's really just a saw. There is some, there's a little dimension expand or hyper thing on there for a little stereo. There's a low pass filter on there with probably some noise mod going on, but it's a basic sound. I think if I just, actually I should do it to the lead because that's the more clear one. If I send this just out to the stereo out, which one would that be? Actually, that sounds pretty horny. That's a cool sound. So this sound isn't that simple. Right, no, this sound isn't that simple. Shit, I thought I made it out of 2 saws. No, it's not just 2 saws. This is a brass wavetable I made, and this is, I guess, a harmonic sort of structure I was looking for, because this looks pretty deliberate over here. So let's shove that back into the morph thing. So now it's going back into the morph, and you can hear it coming out of... And to sort of accentuate the swell, I use this vocal pad. So, you know, some music in there. And it obviously it has sort of question-answer kind of vibe, because this is a different chord. And I really like how that came out. I really like these. I think that's super cool. I mean, that would be something I think back in the day I would sample from a soundtrack, you know, and now I made it myself, and I thought that was kind of cool. And this vocal synth, I think is, yeah, this is from Epica series, a bunch of retro synths, really nice sounding ones, and I think this is pretty much a preset, because I was going for that kind of retro vocal sound, and this is a really nice, yeah, retro vocal sound. So... let's see, what else do we have in here? You see I have a bunch of different kicks here for the intro, so it'll be a slightly shorter or slightly different kick, or maybe a kick with different routing so that it doesn't sound the same as on the drop. Usually I end up wanting to do stuff with the kick on the drop that I don't want to do beforehand, so I split them out. What else is going on here? Yeah, see, there comes that horn again, and I added a little extra semitone. So here, it even does like it morphs away and then has this final like rap thing. So that's all automation that you can see here. Yeah, I thought that was really cool. That makes me feel like I'm in a movie theater, like it's real. And what happens here? Right. There's a nice high synth layer. I'm not sure what that is. Probably serum. Yeah. Well, just a sawy serum sound. Not that interesting, but the way it's processed with the rest and the delay gets pumped up and then pushed back has a kind of cool effect, I think. What happens here? Oh yeah, this is a kind of second theme of the vocal synth. That is also on the drop already. Like, I think maybe, yeah, this is also very, like, really reminds me of like playing Unreal Tournament or whatever, like those sorts of games. So I wanted to have an outro where that featured heavily, and I think here, yeah, this. I really like that sequence of sounds. That was originally the kind of stabs that would make up the main drop, but I changed the main drop so much, these stabs didn't really work anymore to start the song with. So I ended up not needing them, but I really liked them, so I put them in this very last 16. And here again, you can hear that these stabs have this real comb filter flangey quality. Like, I think the sound I was going for here was a trance sound from that song Flight 6 something something by Chesto, like that really flangey, kind of nasty. I think it's a third playing, it's like 2 notes or something, I'm not sure, but I was trying to go for that kind of sound, and I thought that was a cool, like there's a little sort of suggested melody in there because the comb filter is changing pitch, basically is changing frequency. So even though the sound is constantly kind of the same. think if I mute, if I take off the comb filter, see, and that's a cool sound, but it sounds more generic. And it's like, this is one of those cases where if you're looking for just big sounds and you want everything to be big gestures, then you wouldn't really do that. You wouldn't really put that weird comb on it, because it makes it harder to EQ, makes it more resonant. The sound is kind of smaller. It's weird, but it has a vibe. It has like a retro vibe, so that's why I kept it, and I much prefer it to just having a big detuned saw wave. And then there's some stuff happening here. Right. Yeah. So this is also from a very early demo. Let me see if I can find that one. Just quickly. Whoa, what the fuck is that? Yeah. So, there's 110, is this it? Yeah. So that's the first sketch for this track. I should have probably played this at the beginning, whatever. But you can hear the vocal themes already in there, so that was a key feature for me. And this kind of sound, like this is, I upped the BPM a bit. This is 110, so it feels very slow. But that kind of sound spectrally and like with the crunch and a lot of the sound design, I thought was already kind of there. So I was happy with that, but I wasn't happy with the riff. So that's why I ended up making a bunch of different versions and then ending up with this riff. But like I said, I have a lot of leftover material, and some of it I wanted to feature in the outro. So that's why it's sitting there. It's just me not being able to let go of an old idea. So I think that kind of covers this song, for me anyway. If there's stuff you want me to, if you're watching this and you're thinking, well, I'd love it to see more in-depth talking about maybe, I don't know, routing or synth sound design or whatever parts of the song arrangement, yeah, let us know, because I mean, I'm just going through here and looking at what I think is cool and what pops into my eye. So, thank you for watching. I hope you learned something, or at least I hope I illuminated some things in your brain that make you want to go make music or make you want to explore sound. I hope that happened. If not, too bad. But maybe next time. We'll catch you again in the near future. Thanks for watching.